Hey there everybody, thought I'd just make a quick video to talk about all the things I've learned since driving Formula 3.5. Just to qualify things, I'm a pretty average driver. My I rating jumps around between 1.8k and 2k, so nothing special. I'm not here to try and explain to people how to drive faster. There's a lot better people online that can do that. I just thought I'd give the average Joe's perspective of the things I've learned since driving this car. The Formula 3.5 is a really cool car. You can see it's set out in our end-of-life racing colours with the little Reaper on the front. It's basically a little bit like an old sort of 1990s to early 2000s Formula 1 car. It's pretty powerful, it's really high downforce, it's very grippy, and it's got a lot of acceleration. It's very fun to drive, it's very easy to get out of control, and these are some of the things that I guess I've learned while driving the car. And the first thing I've learned is probably applicable to most iRacing, which is to start from the pits whenever you qualify anything lower than about 6th, so you stay out of the mid-pack. If you go and look at some of my other videos, you'll see a channel called Just Don't Crash, and you can see on numerous occasions where I'm able to get quite up into the pack by just simply starting from the pits rather than getting caught up in the carnage of the first lap, which about 80% of the times will happen in iRacing. The second thing you want to make sure you do is, if you're starting from the pits, make sure you engage your pit limiter. Not the sort of thing you want to start a race off with the black flag trying to come out of the pits. And when you're coming out of the pits with 3.5, your tendency will be to floor it and then drop your pit limiter and keep flooring it. In some conditions on some tracks, you'll actually spin your car out, so don't do that. Another thing that I learned the hard way with Formula 3.5 is how to start. In a lot of the other cars like the Formula 2 or the Formula 3, you can pretty much lay it into max revs and you'll get off the line pretty cool. However, with the Formula 3.5, if you rev the guts out of it like I'm about to now and then just drop the clutch, you'll either spin in the spot or do a 360, which I'll show you now. And once that starts happening, it's pretty hard to get the car back under control. I think you're probably just overheating the tyres as well. Try and flip this sucker around. Oh, nope, we're going to crash on my video. So what I learned the hard way after doing this a few times and ending up in crashes in races, and if you do that, you'll end up crashed out of the race and probably take out a bunch of people behind you. So what you want to do is actually just barely depress the accelerator pedal, drop it into gear and then hit the gas, and it'll take off nice and grippy, and you'll be pretty quick off the mark even though it feels slow, like I'm about to do now. So you can see it doesn't sound very spectacular, but we're under complete control. I'm just going to putt through here. Another thing that I learned the hard way, and we'll look at this chicane as an example, is when you're driving around a track, you'll start out pretty slow and you'll be trying to work out what gear you need to be in for different corners and stuff, and where your lines are going to be, and if you're smart, you'll watch some of the really good drivers doing their laps. One thing I found was, as you get to a certain point, your lap speed will flatten out, you get to where your limit is, and then you'll start wanting to push the limits of the track and the car. One thing I found was, in your head you always think you need to brake that little bit later each time to just get around that corner quicker, but one of the things I learned the hard way is if you brake too late, you get, and I'm not talking about braking so late that you can't make the corner, which obviously is bad, but if you brake too late, you start to fail your setup for your next corner. So in this chicane in particular, if you brake too late and go very wide, you've then got to kind of get the car back around and in a straight line, and bearing in mind it is easy to spin this sucker, and so you go through the front part of the chicane fast, but then your exit speed onto this long straight is really terrible. And I'll show you again an example on the next chicane. This is Monza, by the way. So I'm just slowing down down here. So normally I would pick the 100 marker. I'd probably start at the bridge and slowly get to the 100 marker, get down to the gear I want to go through. And again, if you take this one too wide, instead of being able to cut this part here, which is probably where you want to be, and again, I'll leave the experts to tell you how the best go through these corners for maximum speed. But if you do that, you don't set up for the exit. And if you go too deep, you can't get this straight onto the gas exit speed to get up to the next corner, and you'll lose anywhere between half a second to maybe even a second a lap mucking up those two chicanes. And then there's some S's down towards the end here which will putt along around too, so you don't have to listen to the engine noise over my voice, where it also happens on Monza. So I'll just speed up for a moment. Just for slowness. So I'll slow down right here. So this is a perfect example. On this track with my limits in my car, I tend to be braking around the 100. But then I started to try and push that limit and found I'll try to brake a little bit later. But what ends up happening, at least for me, is instead of being able to go tight on this corner, right where you want to be, you end up going wide. And if you go wide, you end up out here, and then you're trying really quickly to get the car back into a nice line to fly through here. Now if I go backwards, which you don't really do on a racetrack, if I just back this up a bit without running into the wall, which I just did, sorry about that. Not really looking in my rear vision mirrors. Cutting across the grass, everything wrong. Kind of back up to where we were. If I brake a little bit earlier and I can come through here and just miss these humps, then straight away I'm in a good position to get back on the throttle, even this far back, to rip out of this set of S's, and that gives you maximum exit speed up here. So if you're not doing maximum, people will catch you, get into your slipstream, and you'll be caught by the end of the straight. So the other thing I learned driving Formula 3.5 is it's not all about setups in iRacing, although if you want to be one of those really good professionals, I'm sure having a really cracker of a setup is going to help you be super competitive. But I can compete in around the 1.8 to 2K mark with the free setups from Major's Garage, so thanks to them with their Baseline Plus, and I very rarely tinker with it. On most tracks it generally goes pretty well. It's a setup built mainly for safe driving and a nice grippy car that's easy to drive for newcomers, so it's not always the quickest, but by just simple consistency and really practice, you can get your times to be reasonably competitive. And the third thing I learned, or the next thing I learned, was you don't have to be the fastest guy on the track to finish in the top 3. In my experience, coming out of the pits, you can finish in the top 10 or even up in the top 3 by just simply being consistent, not spinning the car, not going off the track, obviously not crashing, and you can finish far higher up than guys that are way faster than you who have just been a little bit impatient. And starting from the pits is not as bad as it sounds, it's not as big a handicap as it sounds. It's of course very difficult to win a race if you are starting from the pits, but quite often if you're trying to improve iRating and things, you only want to be in the top 10 or the top half of the table. You can easily catch up because the first lap is so slow from the leader, and because of the trafficking effect around the track. Almost always on just about every track you can catch up to the back of the pack before you're about halfway around the lap, or maybe 3/4 of the way around the lap. So you're basically the same as if you started at the back of the grid, except you don't have to worry about the first corner carnage or anyone doing anything silly, which is generally tends to be what wipes you out. And that's, I guess, some of the things I've learned, or probably one of the other things I've learned, is persistence. If you do get damaged or something bad happens to you while you are racing, don't rage quit. Unless your car is totaled and you can't get back on the track, don't worry if you've got a 5-minute repair and you're 6 laps down or something, because inevitably if you can complete 2 or 3 laps in a race, you'll beat all the people who just rage quit. And although your iRating's still going to take a hit, it's not going to take as big a hit, and your safety rating won't take as big a hit either. And that's pretty much it.